that's an excellent point, is that there's a protective layer on the bottom of the disk, but not so much on the top. There's just basically a label, which is thinner. And that's why when games like this have disk rot, you can see through, because there's actually a hole usually in the label itself that is from a scratch or something like that. So just in general, be careful with your disks. I think this is something we all learned from an early age, but yeah, I don't know. Some people didn't. I've seen some really terrible games, or terrible conditioned games out there. Yes?
She has a version of Double Dash that she got it clean, but it still only goes to like the Nintendo thing, and then it doesn't read after that.
How is it cleaned?
Surfacing, like somebody's professional.
It was actually a very, very good machine.
Huh.
And I think they did it on like one of the lowest settings, and they did it on medium, and it still doesn't work.
I just want to know if you've ever had a game like that that's clean, but for some reason still doesn't read, or if there's another.
Yeah.
I mean, resurfacing is not guaranteed to fix.
The problem is it's not even scratched, though. I mean,
Yeah,
and
that's.
I checked it for disk rot and everything.
And you can't see anything? That
Well,
is.
then we have a gaming issue.
Yes.
I have a suggestion to what
I
I've
see
seen
what
this
I'm
happen with my copy of Smash Brothers for Wii. It's literally possible for, if you've played the game for like forever and the laser is hitting on one specific point, to keep booting it up. After a while, that will burn through. So I actually had looked at the copy of my Smash Brothers, and if you look underneath, it's not always visible, but sometimes you can see a short, very thin line where the laser is just literally eating away at the reflective layer, and at that point, you got to replace the disc.
That's expensive too, so I'm sorry. If anything else, if all else fails, it doesn't hurt to try cheap peanut butter and toothpaste. They're probably not at the same time.
Yeah, try the peanut butter.
Yeah, but I mean, if there's not even any scratches in the coating, then that's difficult. All right, and a little bit more about data degradation. Now, here's what I was talking about before. You have your substrate, your top coat, etc. Moving on. Okay, sorry. This is an issue for mostly prototype cards.
Which you have one.
I do have a prototype. Do you have a prototype card?
No.
Oh, that's sad. So, like, I have an Earthbound prototype card for the NES. And these are generally made with EEPROMs, which are erasable, programmable, read-only memory, as opposed to just read-only memory, which is what normal cartridges use to store data. You see that little window there, that's basically something that can erase the data if exposed to ultraviolet light. And it's just generally not as stable as read-only memory. So most data sheets for EEPROMs specify about a 10-year guaranteed life. That's just guaranteed. So if you have an NES prototype card, that doesn't necessarily mean it's about to fall apart. It just means you should start taking steps to preserve it. And what will happen is that you'll have data leakage. Every once in a while, a stray ray might come in and erase a bit of data, and eventually, if that happens enough, it'll delete, or it'll basically delete it. So the best thing to do in this instance, and I've done this, is to get a EEPROM reader. There are people sell NESs, for example, with a USB hookup that when you put the cartridge in and you hook it up to your computer, run a program, and it will literally copy the data off the EEPROM. You can save it, make multiple copies to make sure it's not there's no problems in the transfer. And then if something horrible happens one day, you put in your cartridge and it won't work, you can just rewrite the EEPROM. This minimum 10 years of guaranteed programming lifetime is just for a program that is sitting on the EEPROM. The EEPROM will still work for a long time. It's solid state technology. It's very robust. You can rewrite on it, unless something horrible happens, you crack it or whatever. So all is not lost if the data on your prototype cartridge starts to fade. You can rewrite it. That's okay. It'll still work for another 10 years plus. So something to note, because I know prototype collecting is becoming more of a big thing. Norm needs to get on that.
Yep.
Cartridge lifetime.
Speaking of leaks, capacitors.
So the biggest issue you'll probably find, if you have a cartridge and you plug it in and you try everything, you try cleaning it, you try putting peanut butter and jelly on it, it doesn't work. The most likely problem is the capacitor lifetime. And I know this is a problem not just on game cartridges, but I know the Sega Game Gear in particular had
Oh,
it.
yeah.
I mean, Norm, you probably know more about that.
Yeah, I've never come across a Game Gear today that just works.
Yeah.
And the problem was when Game Gears were made, there was a big batch of bad capacitors that Sega used. So a lot of them just blew out. You have to replace the capacitors with a Game Gear. If you have a Game Gear that you bought today and it works without any repairs, then you are extremely lucky.
Yeah. So in general, and this is something in general to kind of recall, if you're at all handy with a soldering iron or something like that, you can just replace it's worth a shot to replace the capacitor and see if it works.
There's actually a really good video tutorial online on how to do this.
Unsurprisingly.
Yeah.
I mean something, and this is not just in video games. For example, I work in LED lighting in my normal job, and any LED light bulb, for example, that you buy, it's like guaranteed for, I don't know, it may be guaranteed for 10 years and be projected to last for 22. And it's not like it's not like the LEDs break. Those are, again, very robust technology. Yes, they will dim over time, but LEDs generally just don't break. What breaks is the capacitor in the driver that converts alternating current to direct current. And that's, when an LED bulb dies, that's usually what happens. So something to keep out for if you're interested in electronics, just in general, capacitors are always an issue. In the back?
I was going to make a comment on what's even worse than a Game Gear, probably the sound or the video.
Okay. So yeah, so the gentleman in the back says not only the Game Gear has this capacitor problem, but the Turbo Express may even be worse, which I would definitely believe.
Actually, late 90s, it was industry-wide. There was basically a number of mainline companies that everybody bought their capacitors from, had a huge, and we're talking like several hundred million, bad line capacitors. You had PCs blowing out, you had, but three of the systems that were heavily affected were the Game Gear, the Turbo Express, and actually a large number of the Turbo Duos.
That makes sense. It's all the
Capacities
same
running
time.
capacitors that handle their audio.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
makes sense.
that's something that, especially if you're having a problem with a Game Gear or something like that, you can check, back in history because a lot of people have that same problem. It's probably a systematic error with the capacitors that came from the factory. I mean, there was a big problem we were just talking about with disc run. Laser discs, early laser discs were like mostly all pressed at this one factory in Ohio or something like that in the 80s. And they had a systematic error where air would get trapped in between the layer and cause disc rot, and you'd have laser discs failing all the time. So never rule out that it's just a systematic error that might need to be fixed. Battery leakage. I know that this has been an issue with a lot of Game Boy Pokemon cartridges.
Pokemon, yeah.
If you have a Pokemon cartridge, like Pokemon Blue or Silver, I think
it's gold and
Silver is
I don't think-
particularly
yeah,
bad.
Red and blue is using that.
Yeah, they. How are you supposed to save your game?
I thought gold and silver, it had to have the battery because of the time of day. You had to save the time of day.
Or where does it save the game? I'll fight you.
You probably know more about this than me, so. You know more about this than me, so I'm gonna.
It's a battery backup, so it would have to. But anyway, the point is that if you have a battery in a cartridge and that cartridge is 10, 20 years old, even if the cartridge works, you might want to consider replacing the battery. if you're handy with electronics, you can try to put a power supply on it so that you don't lose your save. Or your saves, yeah. Oh, just replacing the battery is a good idea. I mean, I think we've all had some form of electronics with batteries in it that maybe they sat for a while, and all of a sudden it's not working. You open it up and the battery leaked, and the acid got out and corroded everything. And that's just you want to avoid that, especially with some of your more expensive cartridges like Earthbound or Chrono Trigger, et cetera, et cetera. Yes.
Like a car? Kind of like a car?
So the question was, this is Aladdin, you said?
Aladdin on the Super Nintendo, he claimed if you leave the game on, it will recharge the battery.
I have never heard of that. Yeah, so wait, did you try that and it worked? Or you just kind of... Huh. I've never heard of that happening. That seems like it would totally be something made up on the playground. But... That's actually a really interesting question. I want to look into that more. I can't say for sure. I've never heard of that being a solution. In general, though, like with a car battery that dies, you can boot it, not boot it, sorry. You can
boot up the battery.
You can boot up the battery. God, what is that called?
Jump.
Thank you, jumping. You can jump the battery and then drive it around for a little while and it'll charge back up. The problem, you still have the inherent problem of the battery just losing effectiveness over its lifetime. So it's still, even if the charging thing is true, it's still a good idea to change the battery on older cartridges. Yes? From what I understand, like with flashlights and stuff, you should turn it on every once in a while to stop the batteries from leaking, get some current flowing and stuff. So the question was, is that a good idea for cartridges as well? I don't think it could hurt. I mean, what's the hurt of pulling out Final Fantasy 3 every year or so and just giving it an oral anyway, right? So I was thinking for preservation. Something else that is not common but can happen is solder joint corrosion. Especially if games are left in a bad environment, the solder joints will corrode and lose contact. Again, if you're handy with a soldering iron, you can fix that. Again, not common, something to look out for.
Something that happens a lot in general with electronics, but I had to fix a couple of cartridges like that. Something I found is a lot of people just try to desolder the part with resolder it because they get solder corrosion. But a lot of the time that isn't what you should do. You should just resolder everything without taking the component off because the solder will still melt and most of the time the corroded parts will just fall off.
That's a good point. Sometimes you don't even need to re-add solder, you just need to remelt it, reflow it, in other words.
It's very important.
We have, I think, like 5 minutes left, so we're going to go into a speed round. This is more stuff that doesn't really affect people at the home, but it's just other challenges with game preservation in general. Arcade game, monitors, use cathode ray tube televisions. Guess what isn't made anymore? I think the last company from what I understand, the last factory in China that made cathode ray tube TVs shut down like a year or so ago, maybe a few years ago.
Yeah, and you'd be hard pressed to find a TV repair.
Yeah, I mean, like I have a cathode ray tube TV in my bedroom that I replaced with flat screen just a couple weeks ago, and I don't want to throw out the CRT.
Yeah.
How else am I going to play Duck Hunt?
Yeah, I mean, I'm concerned about the Vectrex life here.
Funny you mention that, Norm.
Yeah.
So even harder to fix than just regular cathode. If you want that real arcade experience, you can replace. There are kits to convert with flat screen monitors, but it's just a little different for purists. Vector arcade machines like Asteroids, like Tempest, like Star Wars, good point, use a different type of monitor completely that in cathode ray tube televisions, what they have an electron beam gun that, or I'm sorry, normal ones, raster scans, what it's called. They have an electron beam gun that goes just back and forth and just paints a picture basically on the front of this monitor. Vector graphics literally have the gun point out a shape, and multiple shapes. That's why if you've ever played Asteroids, I haven't had a chance to look at the arcade in the room, but hopefully they have a copy, so you can play it.
Yep.
I'm seeing nods. It's very, I love vector graphics. Vectrex is an awesome system. It's the only home vector graphics system.
Everything built in.
I think it came out in '82, but it is very crisp. It's great graphics, and it's very difficult to fix. You know, no one really makes vector graphic arcade monitors anymore. So this is something that arcades in general have a really hard time fixing. It's very specialized technology. Laserdiscs. For a while, Laserdisc games were not extinct, but very hard to come by. So you know, on top of the normal problems of Laserdiscs, in the early '80s, games like Dragon's Lair and Space Ace came out. And you know, you can argue the quality of the gameplay, but they were really interesting and, you know, original animation by Don Bluth, and, you know, really immersive at a time when most games looked like that, right? But think about it. You have a Laserdisc player, something that's meant to play a movie, a 2 or 3 hour movie, maybe once every few days. Instead, you have it running at least like 16 hours a day, usually in the bottom of the cabinet where frustrated players will kick and jar it, and these things just did not last long. I think the average lifetime of a Laserdisc arcade game was maybe a year if you were lucky back in the day. And no one wanted to fix them. They were expensive and they were crap. They would just throw out the innards and move on. Around 2000, the first ever arcade Laserdisc emulator called codenamed Daphne came out. And basically what this is something to emulate Laserdisc games. If you play a Laserdisc game, again, I'm not sure exactly what's out here. There might be a Space Ace or a Dragon's Lair. It is, I am almost assured, to be emulated, which in this case is a necessity, because these old Laserdisc players are super finicky and expensive and hard to come by. So
there are positives to ROMs and emulation.
yes, and the team that made Daphne is working on another code named Dexter. These are both characters from the Don Bluth games, which is a hardware replacement. So if you actually have a more robust modern hardware replacement, so if you actually have the Laserdisc itself, you can put it in and it will spin it and it will not die on you after a few weeks. Very sad thing is game company involvement in video game preservation. In the 70s and the 80s, actually even today, a lot of game companies just are not thinking about it. There's an excellent series of articles where Games Go to Sleep by John Anderson, who wrote for Gamasutra in 2011, basically where he reached out to a bunch of different game companies and asked, how important is it for game developers and publishers to preserve their video games for future audiences? IREM Software revealed it has no intact source code from the 1980s, but still maintains ROMs for almost all their games. Taito revealed that some of the promotional materials associated with their games have been lost forever. Digital Leisure revealed that the original source code to Dragon's Lair and Mad Dog McCree was lost, or could not be accessed due to the media it was stored on. So, and this was a repeating story, is that these game companies didn't think about video game preservation. They were in the middle of creating these games in the 80s, and they're like, okay, that's out, what's the next big thing? Ignore that box over there, we've got to move on to this, throw it out, I don't care.
There's actually even worse than that, because companies like Konami and Capcom, the CPS2 and CPS3 arcade machines are actually designed to self-destruct. So that they have a battery, they have a
suicide battery.
A suicide battery that is holding a encryption key in volatile memory that because everything is decrypted on the fly. So there's actually a wonderful Dutch guy who's you can find it on YouTube if you like search
Phoenix.
CPS2
Phoenix.
Phoenix, yeah. He does this hour-and-a-half presentation where he talks about exactly what what they did to basically make these things self-destruct because they were so paranoid about people.
That's fascinating. So search for CPS2 Phoenix on YouTube and you'll get talks about these self-destructing,
and
self-destructing hardware.
And what the main people actually had to go through to break CPS2's encryption so that they could preserve the software.
Yeah, that's
CPS3 has not been broken yet, but they're working on it. There's also a website that you might be interested in. It's called archive.org.
Oh, yeah. That's the Internet
Archives.
Yeah.
Which are archiving.
They're trying to
MS-DOS
preserve
games.
everything, and the way that they're doing it is that if a company comes to them and says, "This is our product, get it off your site," they will take it off the site, but they will still keep a copy of it, so at least it exists somewhere.
Yes, and the Internet Archive does a very good job. Actually, we'll talk about that in a minute. And the final note on this, seriously, take a screenshot of this and look up this article. It's an excellent piece of investigative journalism.
And I want to make one more point about game company and developers today. I read a recent article about developers concerned, specifically developers that make DLC content. And they're concerned about what's going to happen to the stuff that they make, years from now. Because think about it, if you got BioShock and you downloaded DLC content for it, you can only get it on, downloading on the 360 or PS3, and years from now, what if that hard drive dies? Like, how do you access that content years from now? So that's why you're seeing a lot of these Ultimate Edition BioShocks coming out, and the developers really like that because it preserves their DLC content forever.
Yeah, this is becoming more of a question that no one really has the answer to. I gave a similar presentation at the Portland Retro Gaming Expo a few months ago. Someone asked a very good question about digital content. You don't have a physical disc even, so how is that preserved? The question is, we don't know. It's an ongoing question. Interestingly enough, though, about DLC, sometimes you see these Game of the Year editions of Red Dead Redemption or Grand Theft Auto 4, which has all the DLC. The problem is, as you see with this current generation, these game companies want to go more and more to digital-only distribution of games. So 5-10 years, will we even have physical media for video games on consoles even? Yep. One other note about game companies, just to punctuate the fact that this is an issue. Does anyone know when Super Mario Brothers was released in North America? Yeah, Nintendo doesn't either.
There is no official confirmed date of when that came out.
Frank Cifaldi, who is a very, very good and thorough internet video game historian, did a piece for, I think for Gamasutra as well in 2012, called Sad But True. We Can't Prove When Super Mario Brothers Came Out.
Yeah, it was a good article.
Yeah, it's an excellent article. He talked to a lot of people, tried to find evidence.
Found a bunch of newspaper clippings now available, and he checked the date on the newspaper, and they were all different, every single.
So he was able to basically say it probably came out on November 17th, 1985. Probably, but that's about as far as we can get. So this brings us to organizations on the case. The Internet Archive is excellent. They put up a huge amount of old DOS games.
That you can play for free in your browser.
Which is awesome. Some work better than others. The ones from the early 80s work better than ones from the early 90s because it's in a browser. But definitely go to archive.org and check it out. They do excellent work. ACAM, which they usually have representatives here. I'm going to say that they're here, so you should go see them. That's the American Classic Arcade Museum in Weirs Beach, New Hampshire. If you've ever seen King of Kong, and it's Fun Spot. They're basically at Fun Spot. So it's got like a section of Fun Spot specifically where they preserve these old arcade machines, and they do excellent, excellent work. Please donate to them if you can. Actually, if this is something I do, if you ever buy anything off of Amazon, no one does that, right? If you go to a website called smile.amazon.com, as opposed to just www.amazon.com, you can designate a charitable organization where a portion of the proceeds from that purchase will go to, which is awesome.
Yep.
So it doesn't cost you anything, and it can, if you buy, like me, a lot of stuff off of Amazon during the course of the year, that can help. And ACAM is one of the possible beneficiaries. So I do that. You can do it for any charity. So just in general, use smile.amazon.com if you buy something off of Amazon. But yeah, ACAM's great. The National Museum of Play is up in Rochester, New York. They, I believe, I don't want to tell a story that I don't know the answer to. I think it was started by a woman who just had a lot of collection of toys or something like that. And she donated to Rochester and to open this museum. And so it's not just video games, it's all sorts of toys and games and things like that spanning decades, but video games are a big part of the collection. They have some great, interesting articles up there, or not articles, but artifacts. I've never been there, but almost any time I see a new article on the internet talking about video game history and these video game journalists finding something new, they usually find it at the Museum of Play.
Should we mention pinball at all? Pinball games?
Oh.
They're in Vegas, the Pinball Hall of Fame.
I didn't go see that. You did that.
I did, yeah. Basically, just a giant warehouse of pinball games, and you can play every single one of them.
And pinballs were
back from the 20s and 30s.
We didn't
pinball machines.
I know, yeah. I don't know if you knew that pinball machines actually go back almost a century. It's ridiculous. And they're hard to keep upkeep, I should say. The Video Game History Museum is something that has been around for a few years, and they finally have designated a permanent home in Frisco, Texas for a while.
Because they used to go to, they used to travel all the conventions.
Yeah, but it's actually started by 3 very big collectors. Let me say the names correctly, sorry. Joe Santulli, John Hardy, and Sean Kelly. Basically just 3 really big collectors that are like, hey, we should probably open up a museum, yay. And so they did, and they have some really amazing artifacts just to show the public. Joe Santulli, one of those 3, actually also runs Digital Press, which is both a physical shop and online, and an online community collection and community talking about old games and archive information.
It's in New Jersey.
At
It's
Clifton,
in New Jersey.
I've never gone, but I would.
Great story, yeah. It's a great story.
There's a couple more there.
Yep, the Video Game and Arcade Preservation Society is kind of a high-class organization. There's some pretty high membership qualifications, but they're dedicated to saving physical arcade cabinets as much as possible, repairing them, not trying to replace them or anything. And the Smithsonian recently opened up the art of video games. There is finally a section in the Smithsonian for video games, which is come a long way when you're in the Smithsonian.
Travel like 10 minutes north and go see it.
Yeah.
And also, viewers like you help to keep things preserved.
Yep.
One last note.
And there's Pat again.
Shows, because we have more. This is what you came for, is Pat. So, making internet shows are helpful for keeping interest alive. That's part of what we do, why we do what we make. So, if you make internet shows, thank you. If you are interested in doing it, do it. It gets things like Let's Plays and old retro game reviews get people interested and keep things alive. Earthbound was, yes, a cult hit 10 years ago, but it's not the very well-known phenomenon it basically is now.
I think internet shows had a lot to do with that.
It did. I think
our buddy Derek,
our buddy Happy Video Game Nerd did a lot for that in particular. Gaming Historian, which is Norm's show, documents history for future generations. My show, 16-Bit Gems, highlights the forgotten games from that era. Thank you for coming. We are out of time. Here's where you can find us. We appreciate you sitting through our spiel. As a reward, if you would like, I have would you like to save your progress bookmarks with the beautiful Clan of the Grey Wolf logo on the back.
If you happen to read books,
please
it's useful.
So please come up and take one.